Take a few steps back, but starting, of course, at the point where you then resign as the head of the state, as the head of security services. Why did you take that decision?
Well, there was a terrible fallout between Minister Cwele and ourselves. With me in particular, I think Minister Cwele wanted me out for reasons that he knows best and he must explain. Some were incredibly ludicrous, some were malign my integrity, which I will mention at the Commission of Inquiry, if you forgive me. And there was just a policy disconnect between Minister Cwele and ourselves. But there was also some managerial issues. I felt, and others felt, but they can speak for themselves, that he took a very micromanaging approach to the intelligence services, which ultimately led to undermining of the authority of the head of the Secret Service and ultimately led to humiliation in some examples. And I reached enough of it. But for me, what broke the camel's back was when we made certain recommendations about certain operations that needed to be happened, and he vehemently disagreed with that. Again, I cannot mention it. I have been given permission to mention these things at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, and if I'm called before the Zondo Commission, I will deal specifically with that issue.
Is one of those issues the Gupta family and the influence that they may have on the former president?
Yes, that is one of the issues.
Mm-hmm. What was the attitude from the minister when you guys raised this issue?
I've been given permission to discuss these matters at the Zondo Commission. I think it would be inappropriate for me to mention it now. But clearly from what is out in the media, that we were insisting on an investigation and he was insisting that there should be no investigation is not without substance.
Mm-hmm. Do you know whether the president was informed of this?
You're really pushing me on the matter, and I understand that, but like I said, the Constitution says the President must assume responsibility for the intelligence services, and under that constitutional power, I'm aware that the President was not aware of the issues.
He was not aware?
He was not aware.
I don't know. What does it mean? Explain.
Well, you have to figure that out.
No, explain it to our viewers as well. What does it mean that the President was not aware?
I think in this regard again, and the reason why I'm being very cautious on the matter, because I've been given permission to discuss this particular issue at the Zondo Commission. It would be better if this issue followed after, this interview followed after the Zondo Commission. But yes, the President was aware of these issues.
Mm. And you don't know why he didn't act?
It's not a question for me to answer. It's a question you have to put to him.
Okay. And do you think at all during that period and this fallout that you had with the former Minister of State Security was because of political pressure that he was receiving from somewhere else?
I don't know. It'll be speculation on my part. But I think for me the issue goes down to what is the thinking about intelligence in the mind of the President. And let me just say that this is an extremely difficult issue to deal with, because if you read the Constitution, the President assumes the responsibility of the control of the intelligence services. I am sure that he has to assume that responsibility in keeping with his other constitutional requirements of being loyal to the Constitution, good governance, etc. Now, the debate about whether the President misdirected the intelligence services, I think that's a debate that Parliament should have with the Parliamentary Committee, Parliamentary Standing Committee on Intelligence to have. But I can see that this is possibly one of the gaps in the Constitution, not so much in terms of what do you do, that the President assumes the responsibility to direct the intelligence services, but the question is what do you do constitutionally when the President misdirects the intelligence services. And I'm not too sure, and you need all the clever blacks to discuss this matter, because it's a constitutional issue.
Do you think it was intentional?
Again, how a president exercises his prerogative is the fundamental issue at heart here. And can the president exercise his prerogatives willy-nilly or irrationally? I think many courts have found that anyone who exercises authority has to do so rationally. So the question is whether the president passed the rationality test in this regard. Again, I'm not clear it is an open-cut matter. I have my own views, yes, and my own views, it may not necessarily be the legal view. My own view is that I think the president did act on occasion irrationally.
Irrationally. By even amalgamating?
I think that was a very ill-considered view. Again, it may not be illegal, but I think all the issues in respect of what went into separating the intelligence services in the first place were not considered when the amalgamation took place, and they should have been considered. There were very rational reasons why the intelligence services were kept separate.
Do you think, and again you probably would argue that you can't speak on this, but do you think that the intention was to weaken the intelligence services?
No, I don't think the intention was to weaken the intelligence services. I think that was a consequence of an ill-considered move. The intention was not to weaken it. I think, if anything, the President and the Minister will argue the intention was to rationalize a cost-saving exercise, to concentrate the intelligence effort. But it didn't pan out that way. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the outcome versus the intention.
Did you ever raise these issues with the ANC, including the issue around the Gupta brothers?
With the ANC,
with the ANC itself?
In my capacity as the head of the Secret Service?
No. I'm asking with the issue around the Gupta brothers and the influence of the Gupta brothers on the president. You've raised this issue with the minister at the time, Siyabonga Cwele, but have you ever raised it with the ANC as well and said, this is what's happening?
Yes, that's an important question. And that's why I'm asking, when you mean in my capacity as the head of the South African Secret Service, the answer to that question is no, and there's a reason for that. As the head of the South African Secret Service, I am not, the Constitution says I must be politically non-partisan. The issues of the ANC are the issues of the ANC. The issues of the state are the issues of the state. So no, in my capacity as the head of the Secret Services, I did not do so. But in my capacity as a veteran of the ANC, in my capacity as a long-standing member of the ANC, in my capacity as someone who's concerned about the ANC, yes, I did.
And what was the ANC's attitude?
The ANC listened to what we had to say. Then you'll remember that Secretary General at the time, Montash, made an invite for people to make contributions. And I think in the end, what followed is the establishment of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, which is what some of us were calling for in the first place.
But don't you think the establishment of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry was because of the public protector's work, not so much because of the ANC's work? Because some argue that the ANC didn't do much to slam the brakes on what was happening at the time.
Well, that's a very interesting thing, because the person who established the Commission of Inquiry, quite ironically, is President Zuma. And when he did so, at the time, he was also the president of the ANC.
No,
so
he was the president of the country, just the president of the country.
Yes, but he was also president of the ANC at the time he established the commission. So you can debate whether the thinking of the ANC influenced him to do so. And I think by the nature of our democracy, by the governing party ruling, I think you cannot dispel the fact that there may have been some thinking within the ANC that recommended to the President in his capacity as the President of the Republic to go ahead and appoint the Commission.
Okay. Just a final one. The oversight role that's played by the Inspector General of Intelligence, do you think that the Inspector General of Intelligence has enough power, even some of the recommendations that were coming from that office are implemented to the letter?
My answer to that question is, I think not. The Inspector General, Office of the Inspector General was appointed or established by law, and at that time it was believed that it will evolve its powers. We have not had Inspector Generals, and I don't want to be unfair to Inspector Generals per se, but I think there are some certain structural weaknesses, and that is what the panel found. For example, the budget of the Inspector General is dependent on the Ministry of Intelligence. I think that needs to change, and I think the panel makes a recommendation in that regard. Secondly, the workings of the Inspector General, where do they get their staff from, etc. They are dependent on the intelligence services for their staff, and I think that needs to be viewed, reviewed. I can understand why, but I think we need to look at whether that is effective. So if there's more separation from the Inspector General's office, from the Minister of Intelligence, and from the intelligence services themselves, I think we may be seeing a different kind of outcome. And I think that's the battle that must be fought by the Inspector General's offices, and I think they are doing that. Secondly, in that regard, I think the Inspector General should be given more authority in the event of non-compliance by the intelligence services. So in other words, there's got to be a kind of incentive for the intelligence services to cooperate with the Inspector General, even if that incentive has to be a recommendation of criminal prosecution. I think non-compliance by the intelligence services at this point in time has no material effect. Therefore, it's easier not to comply than to comply.